Welcome to TYT Interviews. I'm Anna Kasparian. As you all know, during this presidential election, one of the issues that brought Bernie Sanders to the forefront is the fact that he talks quite a bit about the disadvantaged, those who are in the working class, those who are living in extreme poverty. In fact, because of income inequality and because of the economic meltdown that happened in 2008, we have a growing homeless population in the United States that continues to go neglected. But there are some individuals and organizations out there that seek to help those who are disadvantaged, particularly those who are homeless and hungry. One of those individuals is with me today on TYT Interviews. He is the director of Monday Night Mission here in Los Angeles. He's doing incredible things to help feed the homeless. And Mel, even though I've attempted to pronounce your name on several different occasions and I've butchered it, I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself. So it's pronounced correctly.
My name is Tillekeratne, and that's a Sri Lankan name. That's why it's so hard and long. Yeah.
But it's such a pleasure to have you here. And it's incredible what you're doing. I really want to share your story with our audience so they can understand, just some of the great things that are happening throughout the country, specifically here in Los Angeles when it comes to helping the homeless, making sure that they're fed, and also discussing some of the myths involving homelessness in this country and, basically proving what's really happening, who these people are, why they're on the streets, and what we can do to help them. So this is obviously a very complex issue, but before we get into all of the nitty-gritty involved in this situation, I want you to give me a little bit about your background information. You are from Sri Lanka. What brought you to Los Angeles? What is your background, and why is it that you feel so passionately about helping the homeless?
I came here in 2003. I came here for school, and then I ended up settling here. And I think what started me on this route was I lived in LA County, West LA, Santa Monica for 7 years. And then one night by accident, I drove through Skid Row.
Oh, wow.
And that was a rude wake-up call as to knowing that LA does have an issue. I mean, when I lived in Santa Monica, I knew there were people who were homeless, but you met them one at a time. But the night I drove through Skid Row, it was hundreds. And what started as something to be just one night a week, just seeing the need of how bad it was, it just took off to 5 nights a week.
People read horror stories about Skid Row, but you don't really understand the severity of the issue until you see it for yourself. It's really a sobering experience. And it's not just that there is a huge group of homeless people in downtown Los Angeles. They've essentially created their own community where these people are living on the streets. They put up their own tents in the nighttime for shelter. It's not just adults that are living in extreme poverty and living without a home. These are entire families. There are children involved. And they're considered throwaways of society because while you hear politicians talk about addressing the needy, nothing's ever really done. But thankfully, there are some organizations that are doing great things to help the homeless in Los Angeles. And one of those organizations is Monday Night Mission. So tell me a little bit about that.
So as far as what we do, we go to Skid Row Monday through Friday night. And it's pretty much 51 weeks out of the year. We just don't go on the holidays when there's abundance of food. So we go, and not only do we try to, we try to do a couple of things. Of course, primarily we try to feed the people who are hungry on Skid Row, but we also try to make connections. And on another angle, we try to expose a lot of people who are new or don't know about Skid Row to Skid Row. I mean, you hit on a really good point when you said people have this idea, but have no idea that there are actual families living there. And there's tons of kids living on Skid Row. So that's part of some of the things that we try to do is not just feed, but connect with the people, become a line of resources if they need, and also create awareness to the rest of LA that, okay, this is Skid Row, this is how bad the problem is, and this is what we need to help.
Share some of the stories of people that you've met on Skid Row, because there is this thought process among the general public that people who are in that type of dire situation made terrible decisions in their lives to end up there. But that's not necessarily true.
It definitely not. It is not true. Because one of the things is Skid Row isn't a really good example for homelessness. Because Skid Row unfortunately has a concentration of people, of homeless people who are mentally ill. I'd say more than like 30-40% suffer from severe mental illnesses. So it's not a good example. And what a lot of people don't understand is these were people who had regular lives, who had regular careers, who went through an episode in their life where, they suffered from a mental illness. It got out of control and they landed on Skid Row.
Yeah.
And one of the ladies who come through our line, she's probably anywhere from 65 to 70 years old. And she is known to be, she used to be an attorney.
Wow.
She actually worked in downtown, but she had a psychotic break and that ended up on Skid Row for the past 15 years. So you get a lot of people. Yes, you get people who made wrong decisions, but still, you get a lot of people who end up there just out of circumstance for them.
One of my good friends is a social worker and a therapist, and she worked for a nonprofit organization in LA County. And, she had clients assigned to her who, were dealing with similar issues. There was one extremely young client, a guy in his 20s, early 20s, who actually came from a very wealthy family, but then he got diagnosed with schizophrenia. And his family wanted to do everything to help him, obviously, but he didn't want to accept the fact that he had this mental illness. So his situation devolved to the point where he was living on the streets. Here's this kid, or this guy, I should say, who has this wealthy family, who has all these resources, but he has this mental illness that he hasn't come to grips with, and he ends up homeless, right? And so people will see him on the streets and just assume that he's a throwaway, that he made the bad decisions in his life. When in reality, he was in school, he was on the up and up, and then his life completely changed once he got, diagnosed with this mental illness. Thankfully, because of the nonprofit that my friend works for, she was able to help him, and now he's on the right path. He's, getting the medical treatment that he needs to ensure that he has a normal life. But a lot of people don't have those types of resources. So what would one of the solutions be to kind of address the mental health issues that these people have and the lack of resources that come with it?
I think there is a big need for mental health resources for the people. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the reasons we keep failing is because you can't give mental health care to a person on the street. They have to be, one of the things that, I've learned through this process of 5 years of serving down there is when you talk to psychiatrists, when you talk to psychotherapists, a lot of people, take a long time to adjust to their medicine. Mm-hmm. And when you put in the stressors of an environment like Skid Row, which is very violent, when you put in changing temperatures, when you're sleeping outside, their medicine doesn't work the way it's supposed to. Mm-hmm. So what is needed is, not only do they need care, but they need care in a controlled setting where they are taken care of, where they don't need to worry if they're going to get beaten up or raped through the night. So we definitely need more mental health resources, but we also need a lot more options where these people are treated in an environment where it's safe.
That's a great point. So one of the solutions that we've seen in the country that, I've read that it's been successful, but you say that there are mixed results, has to do with how Utah dealt with its homeless issue. So in Utah, which by the way is not a progressive state by any means, decided, hey, you know what, we're having a huge problem with our homeless issue. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to simply give homeless people homes. And we're not going to have any strings attached. We are going to give them resources necessary to create a better life for themselves should they want that. But our number one goal as the state of Utah is to just get these people off the streets. Now, a lot of conservative heads exploded because they felt like, oh, well, here are some people taking advantage of the system. But then all of a sudden, conservatives realized, well, our property values are going up because the areas where all these homeless people were are now being cleaned up, right? And so it's been beneficial for both parties. But you say that there might be mixed results there. Why is that?
The reason we say it is the program they have is solid. Mm-hmm. It's called permanent supportive housing, and that's what we need. What permanent supportive housing does, like they did in Utah, is they take people, mostly the chronically homeless, who've been homeless for more than 3 years, they put them in a safe setting, and then they don't ask them to be sober. They don't ask them, there's not a lot of requirements. They give them a safe environment and then give them the help to become sober and become mentally stable. Mm-hmm. And it works. LA actually had a program called Project 50 on 50. Mm-hmm. And in the last 6 years we've had it, They've actually had 133 people. Out of that 133 people, 94 are still in housing.
Wow.
And that project, and it to be honest, it actually saves money. For every dollar spent on that project 50 on 50, the return was $2 within the first 2 years, $6 within the first 4 years. Now, the problem with comparing Utah and LA is LA's chronically homeless population is larger than Utah's population.
Definitely.
So a lot of the politicians in LA are just focusing on, okay, let's just do permanent supportive housing. But Utah has enough land to create housing, build housing. We don't. And one of the biggest problem is we have NIMBYism, not in my backyard. You can build all the housing you want in Skid Row, but you can't build it outside of Skid Row. So because of that, it has to be a multi-pronged approach. Yes, we do need permanent supportive housing. We have over 12,000 chronically homeless individuals who need that and who will benefit from that. But until we can get that amount of housing built, which is going to take years, we still need to equally support shelters and other programs that help the people who aren't eligible for permanent supportive housing, or like in LA, who are on a 10-year or longer wait list to get into permanent supportive housing.
Right. And Los Angeles does have various shelters scattered throughout the county. And there are some issues with those shelters as well. I mean, there are some homeless individuals that would rather be on the streets than be in those shelters because of the high crime levels and, some of the dangerous situations that they have to deal with in those shelters. Is there a way, or is there even an effort to help solve that or clean that up?
There hasn't been. I mean, one of the things that we were very interested in last year, we were excited about, was Eric Garcetti said he was going to declare a state of emergency. And what a state of emergency would have done is not just release us extra funds where we could tap into the reserve funds for the city of LA, but it would have also helped us jump through the bureaucratic loopholes where it takes years to build housing, to open more shelters. So what we need is, we do need more shelters, but we need it outside of Skid Row. But unfortunately, in the last couple of years, other than small shelters that accommodate up to 10, 12 people, there haven't been any new shelters that can really help the population and take the burden off the remaining shelters who are overcrowded because they try to save everybody they can.
Well, I get the sense that politicians throughout the country, not just in Los Angeles, don't really prioritize solving homelessness because, politically speaking, there isn't really much to gain. Am I right? I mean,
Absolutely.
it hasn't, maybe Garcetti said that he was going to do something, but oftentimes it's just part of a political conversation that leads to nothing. And I think that's the most depressing and upsetting part about it. I mean, right now we're dealing with a population of people that have no clout, that have no power, and usually politicians like to side with individuals that have power because it benefits them politically and career-wise. This is such a complicated, complex issue because you're right. I mean, Utah might find a solution, but that solution isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all policy for other municipalities throughout the country. What made you so passionate about this issue to get involved, especially considering, the steep hill that you have to climb?
Well, it's really hard. It's really hard to understand why a city with this much resources has people who are completely mentally unstable, who cannot take care of themselves. I mean, we know people who, they are so mentally unstable, they just sit in a place and eat whatever scraps they can around them. And to see that happening in a city with so much resources to solve this problem easily it's sad, it's shameful.
It really is.
So when I see that, I mean, like I said, I lived on the West Side and I saw all the effort that's being done from this city to spearhead other movements across the globe. But to see our own Angelinos just pushed into a corner and just suffering so much, I mean, it doesn't do justice just to say how much violence there is on Skid Row.
I know.
Just to hear about how many, how many things go on. And you were really on point about how you said politicians just sort of throw this away when they're at this level. You know, it's unfortunate. LA is one of those political arenas where it's a stepping stone to a bigger stage. And, you know, just to give you an example, you know, our Mayor Garcetti, he came out around 3 weeks ago and asked to ban non-essential travel to North Carolina because of the way they are treating their transgender population in North Carolina. But then you go to Skid Row and you try to find a bathroom that accommodates a transgender person, you're not going to find it.
Right.
And the transgender population, which is highly disproportionate in homelessness, which is LGBT, have no access to transgender bathrooms on Skid Row, but are we doing anything about it? No.
Yeah, that's actually a really great point, pointing to the hypocrisy of politicians in our own town criticizing North Carolina. In LA, one thing that I have noticed is, you know, the trans community is, you know, disproportionately impacted by homelessness. And it's because of the discrimination of, you know, various companies that refuse to hire these individuals because of, you know, their gender identity. It's disgusting. And so, you know, I live in West Hollywood, and sometimes when I go on my morning runs, I see so many transgender homeless people. There was actually a movie about that recently called Nectarine, I believe. That was excellent. Tangerine, I apologize. You guys should check it out because it perfectly highlights, you know, the issues that we have in Los Angeles and, you know, the inequality that we're dealing with, not just with minorities, but specifically LGBT communities. And it's very depressing. For our audience members that want to know more about your organization and want to get involved, how can they do so?
Well, we actually have a very simple process of inducting new volunteers. You basically go on Facebook to our page and RSVP and say you're joining on whichever night. So we're on Facebook at Monday Night, facebook.com/Monday Night Mission. You go in, you read the instruction on how to prep, you turn up, you RSVP, then you turn up at 7:30. It's that simple. But there are other things that we are focusing on as well. In the near future, we're trying to bring on mobile showers. That's a huge need for Los Angeles. As well as in 5 days, we are holding a march in Hollywood to bring attention to the circumstances that are surrounding homelessness in LA, especially with the rising homelessness that we just learned of very recently.
Yes, I actually do want you to talk a little bit more about that march. The march is taking place on May 14th.
Correct, Saturday.
And so for anyone who wants to get involved with that, where can they find information about it?
On our Facebook page. It's actually organized through our organization, Monday Night Mission, plus another amazing organization called LA on Cloud 9. Basically, on Saturday, the 14th, we're going to meet at 4 o'clock at the corner of Hollywood and Vine. It's going to be a peaceful protest. Everybody's welcome. And they're going to march down to Hollywood and Highland and just basically try to get the awareness of the rest of LA and our politicians and say, hey, we have a huge problem on our hands. It is a crisis. And we have to react to it in a way that it is a crisis to just to stem the flow. Just right now, even to put a Band-Aid, we really need to react to the problem now.
Absolutely. And you know, there needs to be more compassion, more empathy. And it's really fascinating to see an area like downtown Los Angeles getting gentrified the way that it has been, where you see these multi-million-dollar lofts in some situations, and then you see this massive population of homeless people living on the streets with their entire families. We need to do something to address this. Yes, it's a complex issue, but it's an issue that not only impacts the homeless population, it impacts all of us.
Absolutely.
Because who knows what would happen to us? Who knows what could happen if we get diagnosed with a mental illness? It could impact anyone. And so I love that you're doing something to address the problem, and hopefully it leads to some real change, not only in Los Angeles, but in the country. Mel, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for giving me the chance.
All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed the interview. If you want to get involved, look up Monday Night Mission on Facebook, volunteer, do what you can. We always appreciate your help. Have a good one.